I want to take you now to Washington, where U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro is giving an update on the criminal investigation into Fed Chair Jerome Powell.
Today, however, in Washington, an activist judge has taken that tool away from us by inserting himself and preventing the grand jury from even obtaining, let alone hearing evidence. He has neutered the grand jury's ability to investigate crime. As a result, Jerome Powell today is now bathed in immunity, preventing my office from investigating the Federal Reserve. This is wrong, and it is without legal authority. In June of 2025, Jerome Powell testified before the Senate Banking Committee, making, quote, questionable statements that did not comport with publicly available documents. And it was regarding the atrocious cost overrun of more than $1 billion. I didn't say million, I said billion, in renovations to his headquarters. This from the man who says that he is the steward of our public funds. In November, the United States Attorney's Office began an inquiry. Prosecutors from my office gathered information for months before we served 2 grand jury subpoenas. On December 19th, we sent an email to the Federal Reserve to have a conversation, a meeting, or even a phone call to discuss our concerns. There was no response. On December 29th, we sent an email to have a conversation, a meeting, or even a phone call to discuss our concerns. Again, we were ignored. We, in fact, asked to meet the first week in January. We were ignored. It was at that point that 2 grand jury subpoenas were issued to the Federal Reserve, not even to Jerome Powell. Again, no response, no compliance, but instead a woe is me video by Mr. Powell falsely claiming that he was being threatened with criminal indictment. And claiming victim status, Powell proceeds to call his political friends in D.C. and around the world to gin up support for himself, all the while refusing to produce simple documents. Now enter local District Court Judge James Boasberg, whose written decision on its face makes clear his antipathy toward President Trump and this administration. He quashes both subpoenas, thereby prohibiting us from reviewing any records and precluding us from submitting records to the grand jury. That grand jury, of course, comprised of ordinary people. Ladies and gentlemen, no one is above the law. But for the first time, a judge is ruling that a grand jury subpoena, on its face legal in all regards, can be ignored because a judge thinks the subject is beyond reproach. This is a decision that is untethered to the law. It creates chaos where any defendant who wishes to evade an investigation, guilty or not, can allege I'm a victim, I'm being targeted, and therefore you cannot investigate me. And if you find the right judge, he'll buy it. This is the antithesis of American justice. Exonerating anyone without any records, without an investigation or question, is not how our criminal justice system works. This judge has put himself at the entrance door to the grand jury slamming that door shut, irrespective of the legal process, and thus preventing the grand jury from doing the work that it does. So what is the law? What is the law? According to the United States Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, certainly higher than the court that Boasberg is on, a grand jury, every grand jury, has broad discretion to, quote, investigate merely on suspicion that the law is being violated, merely on suspicion the law is being violated, or because it wants assurance that the law is not being violated. In fact, the court says a grand jury may act on tips and rumors. Right here are the cases and the citations from the highest court in the land. And yet this judge is shockingly requiring the government to show something akin to probable cause, and those are his words, probable cause, in order to justify the issuance of a grand jury subpoena. Folks, probable cause is not and never has been the standard that prosecutors in this country need in order to go into a grand jury. This is not and has never been the law of the land. And so this decision today by Judge Boasberg runs directly afoul of our highest court's admonition that courts and judges must not and cannot saddle grand juries with mini trials and preliminary showings that impede a prosecutor's investigation and thus frustrate the public's interest in the fair and expeditious administration of justice. No one, folks, is above the law. And this outrageous decision will be appealed by the United States Department of Justice. Go ahead, sir.
Do you think that your office's failure to attempt to prosecute 6 members of Congress?
I'm not here to talk about 6 members of Congress. I'm here to talk about the fact that the grand jury has a job. They look at evidence. They decide whether they want to indict. If they don't indict, so be it. And if you want to know what the judge thinks, go ask him. Next question.
Can I get your reaction to statements from Senator Tom Tillis, who you know has been blocking and vowed to continue blocking?
You know, honestly, I don't know and I don't care, and I'll tell you why. I am in a legal lane. All of the rest is white noise. I don't care what they say. I have a job. I have the ability to go into a grand jury. There are questions that the American public and people in D.C. are entitled to know where $1 billion has gone, and that's my focus.
But he is asking for an assurance that the investigation into Powell has ended it. Are you willing to concede?
Did you hear what I just said?
Yeah,
I just said that this decision will be appealed by the United States Department of Justice. That's the answer to your question.
Crimes exactly are you investigating?
We're looking at 1001, and we're also looking at a statute having to do with fraud, but it's up to the grand jury to make that decision. We're $1 billion over in cost overruns. Are you kidding? $1 billion? We're not talking about huge buildings here. Go ahead.
Kevin Warsh is Trump's pick, though, President Trump.
I don't even know who he is.
So isn't this just essentially holding up President Trump's pick or any forthcoming picks since Senator Tillis said he will not vote?
Okay. I don't know how to explain this, but I'm going to try. I've been a prosecutor, a judge, a DA, and now a United States attorney for well over 3 decades. Politics is not the lane I'm in right now. And I have a charge and an oath to the Constitution. And my job is to present evidence, and I can do so when I can merely on the suspicion that the law is being violated, or even just because I want assurance that it's not. I'm not in those lanes, and I will not allow myself or my staff to be in those lanes. And that's why we brought crime down in this jurisdiction. We are focused on the law. We're focused on the people of the district. We are not focused on politics. Go ahead.
Judge Boasberg, in his opinion, said that you, quote, promptly complied, unquote, with President Trump's apparent direction to prosecute Powell. Can you just state for the public record, how did you have the idea or, the impetus to start this inquiry?
First of all, he's totally wrong in his assessment of the dates, and that's why we're doing a motion to reconsider, because he got his dates wrong. And as far as I'm concerned, this was something that was of public interest. It was something that the Senate Banking Committee wanted information on, and it is something within my jurisdiction and my charge. But I want to tell you a story. When I was a young prosecutor, I was one of the first people to investigate child abuse as a crime. Everyone thought it was a social problem and not a criminal justice problem. The kids are better off with their parents. There was an organization, and that organization didn't have a very good reputation. And it was one of the societies that was out there trying to prevent cruelty to children. And I set up a relationship where they would bring me cases. And people were outraged that I would deal with this organization. And my answer to them 30, 40 years ago, I'll deal with the devil. I'll take a case from the devil if you can give me information that will lead me to possibly find a crime. It doesn't matter where a case comes from. It doesn't matter. I can have a suspicion. I can read the newspaper. I can just want to make sure he didn't commit a crime. So don't make, the judge is wrong on his dates. He is wrong. That's why we're not only appealing, we're making a motion to reconsider. Okay, I want to say one more thing, and I think it's important that you guys hear this from me. There's another way of looking at this, and that is that it's not just the public being fed up with this stuff. It's the fact that what we've got are grand jurors who are supposed to hear this, and they haven't been able to hear any of this because someone has decided that they're not entitled to hear this. Can you take this? Thanks. This process has been arbitrarily undermined by an activist judge. We have a process. We have been asking for information about a matter that has raised questions in many people's minds. Senate banking, the public, the papers, it doesn't matter. So give me the information so I can assess it. Give me the information so the grand jury, comprised of regular Americans, can say, there's nothing here. And I'll accept it the way I accept other cases. Okay? Whatever it is, we'll abide by it. What we don't accept is a judge standing in front of the door of a grand jury blocking our access, a role that has never been envisioned, a role that will now be used by other defense attorneys around the country, who's going to come in with a client and say, oh, my client is being targeted. Don't you dare go in the grand jury. A judge says, yes, the guy's bathed and washed in immunity, and you can't go after him. The process should have been allowed to run its course, and it wasn't. And shame on them. Oh, cut it out. Do you know how many convictions we've got? Cut it out. You're in one lane. We have cleaned up this city. Yeah, historic, really? I'll tell you what's historic. What's historic is that I prosecute everything other than 10% of the cases, where the United States attorney before me didn't prosecute 67% of the cases. That's what's historic. I'm willing to take a not guilty. I'm willing to take a no true bill, because I'll take all the crimes and put them in. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the time we have.
Okay, everybody, we have been listening to a fiery press conference from U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro here. This is in light of federal judge James Boberg quashing grand jury subpoenas sent to the Federal Reserve Board as part of this criminal probe by her office into this cost overrun of renovations to the Fed headquarters in D.C. Costs have ballooned to $2.5 billion. Judge Pirro just said that more than $1 billion have been in cost overruns. Judge Boasberg said that those subpoenas were a pretext to pressure Chair Jerome Powell into voting for lower interest rates or resigning. Judge Pirro accused Judge Boasberg of being an activist judge. She said that Fed Chair Jerome Powell is bathed in immunity, and she called his January video in which he announced that Justice Department investigation, apparently targeting him, as a woe is me video claiming victim status and alleging that Powell called his political friends in D.C. to gin up support for himself. She said that this judge is showing antipathy toward President Trump and that the judge has put himself at the door of the grand jury and slamming the doors shut. Let's go ahead and now go to Department of Justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane here. Scott MacFarlane, Pirro calling this decision outrageous, saying she and her office will appeal and file a motion to reconsider, and saying that this is unprecedented. And interestingly, Scott, she was asked, what are you guys looking at? What charges? She said they're looking at fraud and they're looking at Statute 1001, which by my cursory Google search is when someone knowingly and willfully falsifies, conceals, or covers up by a trick, scheme, or device a material fact or makes a false or fraudulent statement.
Yeah, those are fraud charges that she's pondering. But I got to tell you, Lindsay, we read a number of court opinions in this office every day. We read perhaps more than we should. I have never seen as blistering and unequivocal a court opinion as the one Judge James Boasberg handed down to stop these subpoenas in their tracks. The judge is basically saying, unambiguously, that this was political gamesmanship by the president and his supporters to try to get interest rates lower and to do through a political prosecutorial mechanism. The judge said in so many words, Lindsay, a mountain of evidence suggests that the government served these subpoenas on the board to pressure its chair into voting for lower interest rates or into resigning. On the other side of the scale, the government has produced essentially zero evidence to suspect the chairman of a crime. The judge goes on. This passage I underlined a couple times. The president spent years essentially asking if no one will rid him of this troublesome Fed chair. He then suggested a specific line of investigation into the chair, which had been proposed by a political appointee with no role in law enforcement, who hinted it could be a way to remove Powell, and that the president's appointed prosecutor promptly complied. Judge is not being subtle here. He's saying this was politically motivated for a political end, and you are not to use the criminal justice system for that in America.
What was the point that the judge was trying to make there about probable cause, saying that that something that Boasberg had said in his ruling about probable cause was not according to the rule of law?
The motion to quash these subpoenas, which was filed by the Federal Reserve Board itself, not by Jerome Powell, but by the Reserve Board, was making an argument that there's nothing there in these subpoenas. There's nothing to substantiate or to justify these subpoenas. You have to have a reasonable reason for the subpoenas. The judge was agreeing with that motion. The judge didn't summon this from his own brain. This was a motion filed to stop the subpoenas by the Federal Reserve, and he was ruling on that motion, and he was ruling affirmatively in support of it. Yeah, they're going to try again, but I think that misses the greater point. The Department of Justice has tried multiple times in the District of Columbia, right here in Washington, to bring charges that were politically toxic or politically motivated, and grand juries have shot them down time after time. You remember that sandwich guy case, the guy accused of throwing a sandwich at the federal agents? Justice Department tried to charge him. Grand jury said no. They found an end around. There have been other cases, alleged assaults on law enforcement. Grand juries have said no. Letitia James, they tried to bring a case against her twice. Grand juries said no. Grand juries are not ignorant of what's going on in the news. This may be a very heavy lift for the U.S. attorney to try again on Jerome Powell.
What does it say that we have a blistering ruling from Judge Boasberg claiming politics, and we have a blistering press conference from a U.S. attorney claiming politics, that the judge is an activist judge.
Judge James Boasberg, the chief judge of the District of Columbia, was appointed many years ago, but he has been a foil of the Trump administration. They didn't like one of his recent rulings. You may remember this one. He's the one who ordered those planes turned around that were shipping the detainees to CCOT, the jail in El Salvador. And he has been a source of criticism for the administration. But he knows people are going to read this opinion. He knew we were going to read this opinion. He chose his words strategically to send a message that this is not normal. This is not how a Department of Justice is to conduct itself, to be an arm of weaponization for the president or the president's administration. He was not being haphazard with his words here. He was trying to send a message.
And also, you had mentioned that he's been a thorn in their side. A federal appeals court in February also dismissed a judicial misconduct complaint that the DOJ had filed per those planes.
Yeah, and that complaint against Judge Boasberg, filed by the Trump administration, they had been battling before, was dismissed as not credible or not worthwhile. Kind of similar to this, where it was deemed not meritorious to move forward. The Trump administration became the Trump administration by campaigning that there were a weaponized bunch of prosecutors in America in 2024. They have now drawn that criticism upon themselves, with charges against James Comey that were tossed, against Letitia James that were tossed, an attempt to charge Jerome Powell, which was tossed. They're doing a very bad job of bringing cases against their political critics and rivals, and they are going to be accused of weaponizing the Department of Justice to nevertheless achieve those aims.
Scott MacFarlane, I don't know what R&B song in your DJ days would be apt to this, but what are we going to do without you? We appreciate you, and thank you so much. We'll be right back here on CBS News 24/7.